Morning guys, coming to you from Crooked Mantle Studios here. Probably the last video that we're going to do from the rental here. We have, the rental is only about a half mile from the farm. We've been pretty blessed since we started the process of building a lodge that, this was right down the road. A good friend of mine, now I have down here, neighbor, and had this for sale, and we knew going into it, it's a possibility it might sell. So it has sold, and we are, we're going to be camper folks here, camper bound until the house is ready enough, or the lodge is ready or close enough to get inside of. So a couple of you made the comment on that mantle. What that tells me about the folks that are tuning into this is your attention to detail is there, right? So I appreciate everybody's following through this series. This series is something that obviously is pretty. It's hard to do. It's one of those topics that we could do a million videos on it. You could do different approaches. I've cut these videos. I've done these videos. I do them 4 or 5 times. It just seems like you can't get it all in, right? And so as we said before, these videos aren't short. They're supposed to be educational and they're lengthy. So hopefully, I know that upsets some folks, but so we're going to finish out the series here on this. The rut changing as we know it. And I think this is the most important video of the 3 series video here. And the reason I say this, guys, is it's something that, like I said in 2 there in the video 2 of the series, it's something that we can control. But I really believe it's part of the whole spectrum or the whole scheme of why folks see the rut differently, and why the rut is changing all over the country. So what is that topic? And the topic of this video is the habitat, the nutrition that comes through the habitat, and the changes that we make change the rut. So before, we talked about all kinds of sorts of things, as far as dates of breeding and conception and conception rates, and when those fawns are born, and the percentage of the chance of having more buck fawns, if the deer density is higher. There's all sorts of things that tie into what makes the rut change in your area. And as a consultant, as a professional that travels the country, I'm not a deer professional, I'm not a hunting professional, I'm a professional, I think, that in my business, and that business is habitat consulting and wildlife consulting. So I don't go around strutting information and puffing my chest out saying that I'm a professional hunter, because I'm a hunter just like you and all the other viewers that watch this, and all my clients. The thing that separates me and the business part of it is I get to see many more properties than a lot of folks do, just as a hunting side of it, which ties into a business. So that ties into this, being able to see and really witness what changes the rut, and why it changes. And a lot of it comes back to, each and every year for me, it comes back to habitat. So the first point that we're going to talk about here is the habitat that we're losing. Buildings, it shocks me to drive around the country as much as I do and see abandoned warehouses, abandoned homes, abandoned this, abandoned that, but nobody's remodeling. Everybody's building new. Even in these high building material times, crazy. New homes going in. What new homes mean? Unless you're buying a farm, obviously, in our world. But small parcels, and you start adding that up in subdivisions, and we're losing habitat. So we're driving deer into certain areas where deer haven't been before, and we're also bumping deer out of where they have been used to being. And so when you drive deer out of where they were used to being, new subdivisions, let's say, it's probably because the farm has been set aside, or the family farm has changed hands, or someone had passed away and that had changed. And now they're breaking it into 10-acre parcels, and they're blowing homes into it, and the deer are going to leave. The reason they were there is probably because it was close to food, so it's probably bumping those residents' does. It's the best way to explain this whole topic is, it's like going to a bowling alley. and we are the bowlers, and the deer are the pins. And when you throw that ball down the alley, and it splits those pins into a million different ways, this is what happens. Everything goes each way, and you do that over X amount of acreage or area in a certain region, and things change. And then you throw the climate. I'm not sold on the big climate change thing yet, but I mean there are some things changing. I'm a believer, I guess I should say, of the climate change. I'm not a believer of what they say is changing it. There's a lot of, that's a totally separate world, but it all plays into the changing of the rut. So back to the habitat side of it. So we're losing habitat. Then the folks are, what we're seeing as a numbers game out here as far as who's talking about what and who's experiencing what. So you've got landowners like myself, or you've got landowners that own a 10 or a 20 or a 200 or whatever the case is, and you have a bunch of us doing habitat management, right? You have a bunch of us in the woods building food plots, hopefully putting your does in that first rim of the food plot, trying to get hinge cutting, making habitat correct. Farms that are doing this are, well, in the right areas, are going to draw and hold more deer than properties that aren't. So you have on these forums, you have folks talking about, yes, I own land and I'm experiencing a great rut, or I did something, and I'm experiencing a horrible rut. Then you have guys on the, like you and I too. I've got leases, and they pop up and they say, hey, we're experiencing nothing. The rut is way late this year, and we didn't experience any rut this year. And why is that? And I think is what that is, like we said, is certain people are doing habitat improvements and certain people aren't. The folks that are doing habitat improvements are going to have the deer and are going to be kind of a controller. Now, what does that mean for public land hunters? Public land hunting, to me, in many ways, I don't want to say it's easier, because it's not, because I'm a public land hunter, and every time I go to say that, it's public land hunting is not easy, so don't take that from this. But you as a public land hunter have way more opportunities to fail than a private land hunter. And that's something that the two worlds have to understand. Is yes, it's nice and it's a blessing to have private land, and we all know that, and I think a lot of us that tune into this channel will accept that, and say that right out. Yes, we know it's a blessing. Yes, it is nice to that old must be nice. It is nice. But on the other side of it, I have public ground hunt or stuff that I hunt. Don't have it here in Kentucky yet, but did a lot of it back in Michigan and across the country, especially out west. And you have more room to fail. If the habitat is not correct in one area, you go to the next area. If you happen to go in and you go in too far, and not maybe knowing the property as well as someone that owns a private piece of ground would, go in, blow an area out, blow a bedding area out, and yes, it sucks, but you might have 10,000 acres to hunt somewhere else. Private landowners don't have that opportunity. So what happens is, you go into an area and you blow that out as a private land hunter. You put too much pressure onto it. It rolls the ball down the alley. Pins go everywhere. Deer scatter during the hunting season. It puts certain emphasis on certain properties and less emphasis on other properties. So I see this is another topic that will tie into this. So kind of a second point here. I always get this question, Josh, I do habitat improvements, I do this, I try to make sure, my hunting pressure is low, and something is missing. There's a guy in this area that doesn't do anything, and he kills big bucks every year. And why is that? Well, the simple fact is, he didn't do anything, he didn't go in there and do any pressure. He might be the only farm in the area that doesn't overpressure it, and or he's just blessed to have correct habitat, where maybe his timber was cut real strong 7 years ago or 8 years ago in most areas, and that density, that stem count is correct. it's kind of a sword maybe to a lot of private landowners that do the extra work, and then there's always someone in the area. So you really, or that someone in the area that, you know, benefits, it seems like they benefit from it. So as a private landowner, that makes this all so more important, that you have to treat your farm with kid gloves. You have to make sure that it's done correctly. You have to make sure the stuff's in the right place. You have to keep your pressure low. You have to understand what region in the country you're hunting. Can you get away with a little pressure on food sources? Should you not in most areas? All that ties into it, and what that does to the rut and how that affects the rut is it's a huge deal. It all depends on us, and where the deer are going to be is where the habitat is correct. Period. Point. You know, set match kind of deal. So if you get lucky enough to find a farm to lease that, you know, the folks do some maybe habitat or some TSI, that maybe there's a forester that has hunting background that really controls their property every, you know, 5-10 years or whatever, and the hunting's dynamite, and you get to lease it and you get to kill giant deer. That's great. Kudos to you. You know, I hope you're paying your landowner well with a lease, because that you need to, you know, because they deserve that. Those properties, those parcels are not around every corner in this country. So take it to heart and hold on to them. Treat your landowners correct. So the last part of this is the nutrition. It's very important, no matter where you're at in the country, to focus on nutrition. In order to hold these deer, and in order to have the rut experience that everybody wants to have, you have to have nutrition. Now, nutrition in Michigan is different than nutrition in the Southeast, right? Nutrition in the Southeast is different than it is in the arid West. So you have to know your region, you have to know what grows, you know, you have to have a balance of the property to hold the deer, maintain the deer, focus your attention on the does, and in order to experience the rut. So in closing, nutrition is not just a big, beautiful 30-inch brassica food plot. It's hard to swallow. A lot of people get their feathers ruffled when I say that, but one of my biggest slogans is that you've heard me say, you know, before, and you'll hear me say 1,000 more times, is your food plots are only as good as the browse that backs them. That's a slogan that I, you know, coined years ago, and I'll stick to that, is because I get to see that on a client property where these food plots are great, but the deer saturate the farm, and the does saturate the farm interior to the first correct habitat, and that habitat might be smack dab in the center of a 40 or an 80, and your bucks aren't there. So you're experiencing what everybody thinks is nocturnal buck movement. Well, bucks aren't naturally nocturnal. So it all ties into it, and I hope that you know, this series has kind of opened some eyes. This last video, like I said, I think is hugely important. You could probably put this first, but it's just something that we tied at the end of it. So focus on your area before you start, you know, saying that the rut is changing nationwide and everything is changing and something must be going on with the deer. Some parts of the country, it is the deer. You know, like we talked about Dr. Deer with James down there, he's got that stuff, you know, that he's releasing, that those deer are you know, 21 days off, and his habitat is pretty correct. You know, that's what he does for a living. He knows his you know, his species of plants. He knows his property. He knows this stuff. But in his region, that's his region. They've got something going on there with doe numbers, herd numbers. They've got something going on with herd health. They've got, you know, when those does were you know, bred when they weren't, something that affected it. Next year, he's already released some stuff that said next year he believes the rut's going to be back on a timely fashion. So it's what makes it it's what keeps the chase very intense as a hunter, right? So a lot of things that change it, a lot of things that you know, influence it. It's an up and down roller coaster. The goal is moving forward into the rest of this year, starting the year. We're going to really try to focus on, I'm going to really try to focus on helping folks understand why habitat is so important. Habitat, trying to hunt something that isn't correct, a farm that isn't correct as far as habitat, is like trying to hunt a field turkey. If any of you that follow this are not only deer hunters or turkey hunters, it's like trying to kill a turkey out in the middle of a field, or it's like, you know, trying to hunt, bow hunt over a cornfield that's ever-changing ag. Same theory with your habitat, guys, and that affects the rut. It affects how it happens. It affects when it happens. It affects your doe numbers. It affects your breeding rates. It affects conception. You know, sperm count in the bucks, health standard. It all ties off from where they live, what they eat, and how they can survive. Period. So thanks for tuning into the video series here, guys. We are diving right into habitat season, so buckle your seat belts, because there's going to be a lot of videos coming your way here shortly on a more steady basis about, you know, ending seasons and when to start and when to get in the timber, and so we can all have an opportunity to have to hunt correct habitat. Thanks, guys.